Hi, and welcome to Turning Point School of Art. I'm Professor Sarah Perks, and welcome to our first week where we look at portraits. What is it that's so exciting about portraits? Why are they so popular, and how can we get creative by making some? There is, of course, a big history and tradition of portraiture throughout art. It's likely you're thinking of a famous painting right now, like this, or maybe this, or perhaps this. Portrait is basically a way of expressing a being, usually a human, but not necessarily. It could, of course, be a pet portrait. And whilst it centers around the idea, usually of a human face, a portrait could go way beyond this, expressing likeness or features without depicting them as realistic. The idea of a portrait is also inseparable from a self-portrait, simply where you're representing yourself. And also popular is a group portrait, which gives me a flashback to this. There are also galleries dedicated solely to portraits. So the UK has a National Portrait Gallery in London, a Scottish National Portrait Gallery in Edinburgh, and many others have a portrait collection. My first recollection of looking at portraits was walking around Manchester Art Gallery, and the work of the Pre-Raphaelites caught my eye. These were a group of artists, a collective of painters in the mid-19th century in England. Artists still love to set up collectives, and they can have any number of members. They just need some kind of reason to come together. For the Pre-Raphaelites, I love the way the women were depicted and the dramatic nature of pieces like Ophelia, Here in the Water. These all looked very lifelike, very real, and so when photography was just getting going around the same time, it actually ended up being one of the most popular ways to do a portrait. In part 2, I'm going to take a bit more detailed look at documentary photography portraiture. Of course, from photography we go into film and video, then into digital art and selfies and social media and all kinds of ways that you can literally broadcast yourself. Now I'm going to introduce you to 5 artists that I get excited about when I think of portraits. To start with, there's an American artist who is very well known for her portraits. She had a large exhibition in London last year, and she is called Cindy Sherman. Cindy Sherman is great because she uses herself to play a whole host of characters and actually hides the real person, her, and instead makes you think about how people are represented. In 1977, also the year that I burst into the world, Cindy started a series that would prove to be one of her most successful. It's called Untitled Film Stills, where she places herself in filmic poses that we recognize from Hollywood. She gives us a snippet, one shot of each character, a glimpse of the story, and asks us to imagine the rest. Also using the cinema as inspiration is Ming Wong, who's often taken on the role of memorable characters from classic films. Ming from Singapore purposely miscasts himself in roles from films in all different languages. He puts himself in the role whether or not it makes sense to us. So he pushes characters across gender and race by roles in films such as Chinatown by Roman Polanski and In the Mood for Love by Wong Kar-wai. In these moments, we begin to realize how stereotypes work, thinking about preconceptions we have and how it might be possible to see things differently. Another artist who transforms themselves into film, but with a very different look, is Scottish artist Rachel Maclean. She creates very distinctive, what we might call hyper-real worlds, where she plays all of the characters, mostly childlike, over-the-top characters with equal comedy and horror. These vibrant fairy tales are aimed at adults, and though like many of these stories over time, they function to question what is happening now in society. In Feed Me from 2015, she looks at the lens people will go to for happiness, including reality TV, and also the inequalities between big business and the average worker. Rachel creates her films with computer technology. For example, she films herself with a green screen behind so that she can replace it with her own computer-generated worlds. She looks at how our desire is now measured by money, or so adverts would have us believe. And a couple of years ago, she appeared on TV as part of a project where she lived in a huge shopping centre in the Bullring in Birmingham for a whole month to see what being immersed there would reveal about our relationship to shopping. Despite all of the contemporary digital media that's available in contemporary art, there's still plenty of artists primarily using painting as a medium. There's been a renewed interest in what some call figurative painting, which is very close to portraiture, usually with more inclusion on the whole figure as opposed to the face. In contemporary art, what things are called can change over time and also depending on your position. But ultimately, if you think it's a portrait, it is. Jordan Castile is an artist based in New York City, and she paints portraits of both her friends and family and also strangers. In many of her series, she paints Black men in domestic and homely surroundings. Here she wants to address stereotypes and show positive representations while the media focuses on the negatives. Her work is extremely human and beautifully sensitive, really pushing the idea of how a portrait can capture an experience, a personality, and how painting offers a certain intimacy that photography, for example, can struggle to capture. Whilst thinking about this subject of portrait, I realised just how often I use the word. I use portrait to describe artists' work all the time and genuinely believe it's a powerful force in contemporary art. It asks us to think about empathy. When you're presented directly with someone else's face, you can enter their world for a little bit, think about their life through their eyes and the information that the portrait offers. I often use it to describe something more than face and bodies though, like a whole take on something, a large view that creates a sense of place or community. My final artist is Zena Saro-Wiwa, who began her career at the BBC and in documentary, and then working in installation and artist film. I think of how her ongoing series, Table Manners, is a series of portraits of people eating and performing for Zena's camera, and you sort of join them, sit with them to experience the piece. For Zena, it's about place and power. Eating food from the land is a relationship with that place, and one that for this area, the Niger Delta in Africa, is inscribed with its turbulent history and the politics of oil. People often take pictures of food or draw food as still life, but rarely does anyone capture people eating the food. It's the small but important ritual that is often ignored. So altogether, these 5 artists give you a glimpse, not really into themselves, but into other worlds, which might be familiar or not, and they push you to take in the details and dimensions of other people's presence.